I'm shaking right now. I feel like my fingers are going to fall off if this keeps up. Yet, I can't keep this to myself any longer. It is coming for me, and when I disappear, no one will ever know. I'll vanish without a trace, and the world will never know what happened to me. God, please, I know I don't go to church. I'm not a Christian, but if what they say is true, and you do exist, please save me. Please bring my mom back. I too do anything. It began only days ago. Or not. It feels like it's been months, maybe years. I don't entirely know. My perception of time seems non-existent now. So much so that love become completely unreliable. I don't trust the date on my phone, nor on this computer. It's jumbled and twisted, like her. These words, as I type them, seem to skew and distort. It follows the carré as it moves, just like how she follows me. My parents went out on a bike ride together. They got along well, rarely ever fighting, and they often went out together to exercise. I was perfectly happy to stay at home, keeping an eye on the stray alley cat we sometimes let in when it was cold and amusing myself on YouTube or working on my book. My book will never be finished now. Of all the things to make me cry, that had to be it. This time was wrong, though. I heard the front door open, and I saved my project, and when I left my room to greet them, my dad was limping. Blood smeared his brow, and he was bleeding from his elbows. I asked what had happened, and my mom answered for him. He fell off his bike. That voice, it was certainly my mom's, but she sounded odd. The soft tones that I had grown used to over 18 years were complete, gone. Even when she was angry, her voice was some characteristically sweet at its core. I asked if my dad had fought, thinking perhaps that might be the cause of my confusion, but my mom told me that they hadn't. My dad smiled at me and told me not to worry, but while he seemed like, well, himself, his voice was strained and his usually tan skin was atypically blanched. That was not what put me off, however. When I offered to help bandage the open wounds on his forehead and elbows, which were rather minor in comparison to whatever internal damage had caused his limp, he didn't protest. He just followed behind me, wordlessly, as I went to get the Band-Aid and Neosporin from the medicine cabinet. My dad never let my mom, nor I, take care of him that way without some verbal back and forth. My dad was kind, but stubborn like a mule. He would always tell us not to fuss over him, though we inevitably would. My mom just stood there watching us, making no move to help my dad at all. He was limping. For Christ's sake, she would have never let that slide without checking to make sure his bones were all intact. They must have fought. That was the only reason I could think of for them to be acting like this, especially my mom. My dad's behavior worried me more, though. He wasn't the kind of person to act so fragile. I wish that more than anything now. I hate when my parents fight, but at least they're both themselves when they do. God, I'm going to cry again, but I have to finish this. I have to keep going before it's too late. And she catches up to me over the next few days, or perhaps weeks. I noticed little things were off. My mom didn't call by my nickname at all, and she almost always did. When she used terms of endearment for me, they sounded forced, like she was reciting them through gritted teeth. I thought she might be on her period, or something. I did everything to explain away the unusual behavior. Maybe the stress of at-home college and the pandemic was finally getting to me. Sure, that had to be right. My dad, though, He looked more and more like a ghost every day. There wasn't even a trace of a tan on his skin, and he was still going to work at the construction site. He was under the sun all the time, yet it didn't make a difference. He grew fainter until that gruff love I knew to expect from him had transformed into something breakable and wispy. He looked at me like he barely recognized me, beyond the signals of his brain telling him that he did. Then I found out why it was feeding on him. My mom, no, whatever creature had impersonated my mom, was feeding off of my dad. A vampire? Something else? The fuck if I know. All I know is that one day I told my parents I was going out. I should have noticed the pleading in my dad's eyes, even when he smiled and waved at me as I left. I should have seen the terror that he could not express in words. I remembered it only when I quietly snuck back inside through the back door, wanting to see exactly what was happening while I was gone. God, I'm still reeling from it, but I snuck through the kitchen and to an adjoining hall where my parents' bedroom was. Our house is only one level. There were no stairs to climb. And when I peered past the half-open door, I saw something that will haunt me for the rest of the little time I have left. She was on top of him, a beast that looked like my mom, but was bigger. Her body seemed to dwarf the king-sized bed. Claws of hers dug into his skin, and her pellucid tongue, which was long and spiked at the end, slithered like a snake into his mouth and down his throat. I nearly threw up, even thinking about it. The translucent tube with such a repulsive sound. I didn't know what the fuck to do. What could I have done? I backed away, trying to keep my heart from leaving my chest. It was pounding so hard. Know that I should never have stood there for as long as I did. I should have started running, but my feet felt like they'd been glued to the floor, my hands affixed to either side of my head, in panic as my back pressed against the opposite wall. When the gulping noises abruptly stopped, I knew I was fucked. Looked up, and her eyes were on me. My mother's face attached by a skeletal neck to that colossal body. Those yellow eyes captivated me like prey. The door opened on its own. She picked up my dad's feeble body in one gigantic hand and threw him at my feet like a rag doll, his depleted form making a thud on the ground. He was breathing, but barely, and his eyes gazed sightlessly forward. Fell to my knees, holding him and sobbing like love never sobbed before. He was dying. My dad. Then she spoke, in my mom's voice exactly, now with the soft tones I knew. You will be him, she told me. I could not see her. If through the tea didn't want to. I wanted to wake up. You will taste sweeter than he did. You are young. I will make you last. I heard a screech, and the tears fell from my eyes, clearing them. For but a moment, I saw my dad's arm, holding her own at bay, with no impossible surge of final strength. His face looked more alive than it had in what felt like forever, and though no sound left his mouth, his lips said, "Go." I did what he asked. I ran. I flung the front door open and ran out, but I nearly fell when I heard the horrific crunching noise and my dad's gasps of pain right behind me. One ran for so long, never looking back. I'm at the library now. I'm on a public computer. This was the only site I could log into. The words are jumbled and the world around me is darkening quickly. I live near a police station, but when I went there, the building was simply gone, like it had never existed at all. I've tried to contact my friend. Please God, she's here.